Welcome back, everyone. So the next talk will be presented by Hongil Kim, a PhD student at KAIST, a national research university in South Korea. His research focuses on security analysis of mobile networks and basebands. In previous research, he uncovered vulnerabilities impacting voice over LTE on multiple US and South Korean carriers. Today, he will present his latest research on LTE networks. Please join me in welcoming our speaker, Hongil.
And thank you, Fred, for the nice introduction. And hello, everyone. Again, my name is Hongil Kim from KAIST. And firstly, it is a great pleasure to present my research here in Qualcomm Product Security Summit 2019. And today, I'd like to introduce LTEFuzz, a dynamic security analysis tool for the LTE control plane procedures. So as you know, LTE is everywhere, and 5G is coming pretty soon. And LTE is not only used for the personal data communication, but also it can be used in many critical applications. For example, connected car assistant for autonomous driving, and industrial IoT devices, and even in national infrastructures, such as railway communication, and maritime communication, and public safety services. And since this LTE communication is widely used in everyday life, so the security of LTE is becoming very, very important. So before we go into the details about LTE security, let's see how LTE works. There's an LTE phone, and this is called user equipment in UE. So this UE first makes a radio connection with the nearby base station, called Node B. And then, using the radio connection, the UE communicates with a mobility management entity, in short, MME, so to fully register to the LTE network. And an MME is the most important node in LTE core network, so it handles critical control plane procedures such as registration and UE identification and authentication, security controls, and session establishment, and so on. So after completing the registration, the UE finally connects to the data network through the gateways. So the key point here is that the control plane procedures marked as red lines always come before the user plane procedures marked as blue lines here. So if there's a single failure during the control plane procedures, all the LTE service would not be provided to the LTE users. So from the attacker's perspective, finding and exploiting the vulnerable point in the control plane procedures are the easiest way to deny or hack LTE services. So previously, there were several studies about LTE control plane security. And these studies mostly focus on the attacks using fake base station. So an attacker can steal user identity and perform a man-in-the-middle attacks, or tracking the user's location, or perform a DOS attack. However, these works mostly focus on the phone-side vulnerabilities. Then, one may ask, what about using a fake LTE phone to inspect commercial LTE networks? And unfortunately, to the best of my knowledge, there is very, very few research about the network-side problems in operational LTE network. Then why is it hard to test commercial LTE networks? In fact, there are huge challenges. First, the carrier's operational LTE network is a closed system. So all the information about their deployment and configuration policies are hidden by carriers. And second, it is very hard to control commercial baseband chipsets for simulating malicious behavior. So we need some kind of fake LTE phone to generate and send malicious inputs to operational LTE network. But the commercial baseband chipsets are not available for these purposes. And third, sending malicious signal to the operational LTE network may not be allowed depending on the country's regulation. And last year, there was one research about formal analysis on the LTE control plane specifications to find potential security problems systematically. They found a lot of attacks exploiting LTE specification problems. And also, there was one attack scenario using malicious UE to deny LTE service. However, formally analyzing LTE specification is not enough to find potential security problems in operational LTE network, because there are several ambiguities in LTE control plane specifications. First, they include a lot of exception cases. Second, they leave freedom to the carriers and vendors about the implementation details. And they also release protocol conformance test cases for helping developers to correctly implement their equipment. However, those conformance test cases are only for the phone side. And in addition, they do not consider the malicious behavior by the adversary. From these facts, even the specification is correct, the carrier's network might have certain mistakes on their implementations and configurations. So we had the following insights while analyzing the previous studies and related protocol specifications. First, ensuring the security of the LTE control plane is extremely important. And second, there are several ambiguities in the LTE control plane specifications. And third, there are conformance specifications, but there are no security testing specifications regarding LTE control planes procedures. And lastly, there were several studies regarding LTE control plane security. However, network side vulnerabilities are still underexplored in academia. With these insights, so we got a strong motivation to investigate the potential security problems of the LTE control plane. So to find either the specification problems or implementation bugs or configuration issues, we decided to adopt dynamic testing method against commercial LTE networks. And this can be done by using an open source LTE software and a software radio device connected to a laptop. So this is an overview of our tool named LTEFuzz. It consists of 4 main steps. First, we generate test cases based on LTE specifications and commercial control plane logs. And second, we execute test cases towards both the LTE networks and the baseband chipsets. And third, based on the results of the test case, we classify problematic behavior. And with this problematic behavior, we construct the practical attack scenarios and validate the attacks with the carriers. So first of all, among the various control plane protocols, we targeted 2 control plane protocols. One is radio resource control, in short RRC, and it is a communication protocol between a UE and an inode B. And that's non-access stratum. It is a communication protocol between a UE and an MME. So these 2 protocols handle very critical functions such as radio connection establishment and network attach, detach, and UE location management and session management and so on. So the simplest way to test RRC and NAS protocol is testing all the possible messages and field values of them. However, there are a number of message types and variations and even options. Therefore, inspecting all the combinations of that protocol is practically infeasible. So when we generate the test cases, we narrow down the scope by defining basic security properties based on LTE specifications. So we had we define 3 properties. And then when we generate the test cases are violate these properties. So for example, in property 2, invalid security protected messages should be handled properly in the receiving entity. So in this case, we can insert invalid values in either of the sequence number, security header types, and message authentication code, and so on. And for other remaining fields, we have to randomly mutate those fields. However, since we test on operational LTE networks, we should not cause any crashes that may disable commercial LTE service. And even in the carrier's testbed, we are not allowed to trigger crashes. And as you know, there are a lot of engineers working day and night to deploy 5G these days. So if I shut down the testbed, then I might not be able to get out of the test room until everything works fine again. So what we have done is randomly picking remaining field values from commercial control plane logs. To do this, we extracted commercial control plane logs over a year, and then saved the field values which are used in commercial network only. And we just randomly picked those values. Since the field values have been used in commercial control plane logs, it won't cause any memory corruption errors in the operational network. So after we generate the test cases, we have to test each case. First, a victim UE is registered to the operational LTE network. Then we implemented UE state monitor to analyze control plane traffic and the UE states in real time. And then there's a tester UE, and it pretends to be the victim UE by using a victim UE's identity, and send test cases one by one. For each test case, we check the response from the operational LTE network, and also we check if the connection state of the victim UE is changed or not by sending ping command to google.com. Based on this data, we have to decide whether each test case causes problematic behavior. The big challenge here is that so many different behavior is observed from each test case. So it is because each carrier has different configuration parameters and deploys different network equipment from different vendors. And even in the same carrier, network equipment differs by the service area. Therefore, the behavior differs a lot even for one test case. And also, the result differs by the location of the tester and the victim UE. There are 4 possible cases. So number 1, the victim and the tester is connected to a same cell area. And number 2, the victim and the tester is connected to a different cell area, but in the same input B area. And number 3, victim and the tester is connected to a different input B, but in the same MME pool. And lastly, number 4, victim and tester is connected to a different MME pool. So we had to consider all these kind of possibilities when we test operational LTE networks. This is so confusing when the test case is done manually. So we have developed a simple decision tree which can automatically classify the problematic behavior by checking only the received response and UE state changes. In the first decision phase, LTEFuzz checks whether the test case is accepted in the receiving entity. If the answer is yes, it goes to the problematic behavior, and further in the second decision phase, if the UE state is changed to deregistration state, then the test case is classified as problematic behavior, which enables denial of service attack. And otherwise, if it does not trigger deregistration, then it goes to the problematic behavior, which enables message spoofing attack. And go back to the first decision phase. If the test case is not accepted, or there's no response from the operational LTE network, then the result may be either the problematic behavior or benign case, depending on the use state changes. So the key point here is that only the test cases that has no response from the operationality network and no use state changes are classified as benign case. So this is LTEFuzz test environment. And for network testing, we targeted 2 carriers. In carrier A, there were 2 MME vendors and 1 InnoDB vendor. And in carrier B, there were 1 MME vendor and 2 InnoDB vendors. And in case of baseband, we also similarly we adopted similar approach to test baseband chipsets. So we targeted Qualcomm, Exynos, HiSilicon, and MediaTek chipsets. So for the implementation, we implemented test input collector and message generator in C language. And for tester, we modified SRS-UE, which is fully controllable LTE baseband, publicly released, which is an open source software. And for baseband testing, initially we used OpenLTE, and we are now migrating the code to the SRS LTE. We also implemented UE state monitor based on the signal link collection and analysis tool, in short SCAT, which we published last year. And by using this, we could automatically classify probability cases for each test cases. So this is our testing demo. So the left side is the UE state monitor, and tester UE is on the middle, and the victim UE's debug screen is on the right side. So when we execute the test case, the UE state monitor just checks the response from the operationality network and checks the use state changes. So our decision tree just checks if it is a problematic case for each test case. For each test case, it took about 1 or 2 minutes, so it took a lot of times. So for the demo, we just tested 32 cases for the part of attach and detach procedure, and the result was that we found 5 problematic cases that are classified as case 3, which enables denial of service attack. So here's the findings. And in total, we found 51 cases. And among them, there were 36 are new vulnerabilities, and 15 was previously known vulnerabilities. And these vulnerabilities are mainly categorized into 5 vulnerability types. And we also validated our findings with the corresponding carriers and vendors. As a result, there were no false positives, but there were 2 false negative cases. One is for SMS test case. In case of SMS test case, there was no response from the operationality network, and there were no use state changes. So our decision tree just classified this case as a benign case, but actually the network just transmitted this invalid SMS message to the destination UE. So it should be classified as problematic behavior. And the second one was about service request test case. And this is because the response from the operationality network was encrypted. So our decision tree cannot correctly decide whether it is accepted or not. Initially, we could not parse the encrypted message, but after some research, we just identified that only the message length of the encrypted message is enough to identify the message types. So this is our summary table of LTEFuzz findings. So I will not explain the details of them. However, in the red box, this shows the specification problems, and the MME vendor problems are in the blue box, and the problems from the baseband vendors are in the green box. And in the yellow box, there are two vulnerabilities in one test case. This shows that two different MME vendors had different vulnerabilities. So from now on, I'll introduce some of the attacks we validate with the carriers. The first one is blind DOS attack. In this attack, the attacker exploits the fact that initial IRC connection procedure is not protected, not authenticated, and not encrypted. So here, the victim UE is registered to the operational LTE network. And the victim UE state is in idle, which means there's no radio connection, so it just waits until the operational LTE network sends wake-up command to the victim UE to make radio connection. So this is just called paging procedure in LTE. And here, the attacker makes a radio connection using the victim UE's identity. Then the operational LTE network thinks that the victim UE is connected now, but however, the real state of the victim UE is still in idle. Therefore, the victim UE cannot receive any incoming call. This is the demo of blind DOS attack. The left side is the attacker's terminal, and the caller is in the middle, and the victim's UE is on the right side. First, the caller, the victim's friend, just calls to the victim in normal situation. So now the victim UE is in idle state, and right after the victim's friend calls to the victim, the state changes to connected. And we just wait until the victim UE state changes to idle. And then attack starts. So during the attack, the state of the victim UE is the network just saves the victim UE's state into connected. However, the real state of the victim UE is in idle, so the victim UE cannot receive the victim friend's call. And also, it cannot receive SMS messages. In case of SMS messages, after finishing the attack, after about 30 minutes or 1 hour later, it is retransmitted to the victim UE. And the second attack is remote deregister attack. And this attack exploits one of the 15 vulnerable cases in NAS message. So an attacker is within the same MME pool area of the victim UE. So here, the victim UE is normally registered to the operational LTE network. And attacker establishes an RC connection using the victim UE and send invalid NAS messages to the operational LTE network. And then the operational LTE network just changes the victim UE state into detached. And then the victim UE cannot use any LTE services. Also, sometimes the victim UE downgrades to the legacy network, such as 2G or 3G. So this is the demo of remote deregister attack. So the attacker and the victim is apart from 3.6 kilometer, which means attacker and the victim is connected to a different node B, but in the same MME pool area. So the MME pool area is known to be a very, very large area. So the attacker starts to attack, and during the attack, whatever the victim tries to do, it fails to connect to the LTE network. So turning off and on does not work. And after some time, it is even downgraded to 3G network, which is known to be much less secure than LTE. And the next attack is SMS phishing. So in this attack, we just identified that for one MME vendor, they did not check the validity of the SMS message. So here, we just send invalid SMS message with no encryption or invalid message authentication code or invalid sequence, and they are all accepted. So it is transmitted to the destination UE. So the attacker just sends SMS message as if it is a victim's friend, and and then the network just transmits this SMS to the victim UE without any validity check. And the last attack is ACA bypass attack. And this attack exploits the vulnerability in some of the baseband chipsets. And here, an attacker installs fake LTE network and waits until the victim UE connects to the attacker's fake network. And at the time the victim UE tries to connect to the attacker's fake LTE network, the attacker just skips key agreement procedure, which is a mandatory procedure for encryption and authentication for further communication. We identified that some baseband chipsets just allow the data session establishment in plain text without key agreement procedure. Then both the control plane and user plane traffic can be eavesdropped by the attacker. So also the attacker can steal user credentials by phishing and redirecting to fake online payment websites and so on. So about all our findings, we responsibly disclosed our findings to the corresponding entities. So for the specification issues, we reported to standard bodies, 3GPP and GSMA. And for the implementation bugs, we reported both the LTE network vendors and baseband chipset vendors. In case of implementation bugs in the LTE network vendors, we first validated all our findings through the contacted carriers, and recently we also validated the fixes created by the vendors. And in case of for the vulnerabilities in baseband chipset vendors, we reported ACA bypass attack and replay attack, and the vendors just give acknowledgement to us, and they said they will be patched soon. So in overall, we have to know that operational LTE networks are very, very complicated and not as secure as we expected. So in a real operational LTE network, carrier has different configuration parameters and deploys different network equipment from different vendors. And even in the same carrier, network equipment differs by the service area. Also, the location of the tester and the victim can result very, very different vulnerabilities on the same test case. Therefore, in this work, we developed LTEFuzz, a semi-automated dynamic testing tool. It can identify various security problems by using an open source LTE software and a simple decision tree logic. LTEFuzz considered a realistic attack assumption in operational LTE network, unlike the previous study just assumed a simplified LTE network. So as a future work, we are planning to extend LTEFuzz to support other protocol layers and interfaces in LTE network. And also, we'd like to test 5G network if the open source version of the 5G is available. We also want to identify memory corruption bugs in the baseband chipset by modifying the LTEFuzz. So this is it, and thank you for listening, and I'd be happy to take any questions.